Today, we're talking maps, but not just lines and colors. Now, the African Union is backing a push called Correct the Map to stop using the old Mercator world map and start using the Equal Earth map instead. Now, the Mercator distortion, which makes places near the poles look huge and Africa look much smaller than it is, has stuck around for centuries and quietly shapes how people see the world. Now, that matters because Africa is the world's second largest continent with over 1 billion people, and the map should indeed reflect that. So the AU, along with groups like Africa No Filter and Speak Up Africa, is asking schools, governments, international bodies and tech platforms to switch maps. And this is not just about cartography. It is a small but powerful way to challenge outdated colonial ways of seeing the world and to make sure that Africa is shown at the scale that it truly deserves. As Moki Makura of Africa No Filter puts it, the current size of the map of Africa is wrong. A distortion, she says, which has become a long-running misinformation that just simply has to stop. Now, today on The Conversation, I'm joined by Dr. Victor Mark-Onyegbu. He is Head of Grants and Community Building, Africa No Filter in Abuja, Nigeria. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us at this time.
For having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, Doctor, your organization has said that the current size of the map of Africa is wrong, and it's the world's longest running misinformation. Why now? What prompted Africa No Filter to lead this push?
There has been so many half-truths and outright misrepresentation propagated about Africa for centuries. But none of them has been so imbibed and unquestioned and accepted like the Mercator projection that distorts the true size of Africa. It came into use in the 16th century and has been in use for about 450 years and counting, right? And so it's been a very, very long period of consuming wrong information and falsehood about the continent. And a very long time to not question a lie, and that's why we are embarking on this campaign right now.
Okay. Well, speaking of embarking on the campaign, now that the African Union has formally endorsed the Correct the Map campaign, what resources will it take or will it bring to turn an endorsement into action across the whole 55+ member states?
Well, Africa Union endorsement has been a very huge advocacy boost for us at Africa No Filter and for the Correct the Map campaign, and of course for our partners, Speak Up Africa. I think Africa Union has done what it's meant to be done right now, because the voice of Africa No Filter, the weight of Africa Union, I beg your pardon, the voice of Africa Union is one that we cannot overemphasize. So it's not just the words, it's them setting the tone for the conversations. It's the influence that they bring to the table, the momentum, the significance, the access, the legacy, right? So the African Union is using its weight and the weight of its influence to call attention to an issue that is reshaping global conversations. And that's something we're very happy about. We believe is the very first step to addressing this issue. It's been a very long period of consuming falsehood, requires concerted effort, and we're very happy that an organization as strong, a voice as strong, as influential as that of Africa Union, has been added to this conversation. We believe that in terms of the resources, like I said, it's going to take concerted effort. There will be financial resources required, but more than anything else, it will require the strong voices of institutions like the Africa Union. It will require strong voices of advocacy organizations as well. And I think it will also require the strong voice of the media, just like you're doing currently. So thank you so much, News Central.
It's a pleasure. Now, you are advocating the Equal Earth projection, as the replacement over Gall Peters or even Robinson maps. So can you tell us what technical advantages does the Equal Earth offer?
Well, when we were designing this campaign, alongside our partner, Speak Up Africa, we held a lot of consultations, several consultations, and we explored other alternatives. Like you said, there are quite a number of projections, and we settled on Equal Earth projection as a preferred representation. It has a number of advantages over the other projections. For instance, with the Gall-Peters projection, which came into effect, I think, in the 19th century, one of the most popular projections, map projections that we have, there are still shape distortions of some sorts, like the vertical stretching of African map and the continents nearer to the south and the northern poles appear compressed. So Africa, which is at the equator, and other countries existing around the equatorial region, like, in South America, we've got Brazil around the same, dimension as Africa on the map, the same location as Africa on the map, but to the left-hand side. We realized that with all of these other projections, you've still got some distortions that compresses, those countries at the equator, and then it kind of gives it a very awkward view, right? It appears like when you copy and paste something and then you stretch it from the angles, right? So we kind of did all of these comparisons with the various projections, and we realized that the Equal Earth projection still stands out because I must mention that with this campaign, we are not seeking a fairer projection for Africa to the detriment of other parts of the world. That's not what we are talking about. Okay. What we want is a projection that reflects the true sizes of all parts of the world. And that's why we have decided to pitch our tent and prefer the Equal Earth projection. It's fairer, it's more equitable, and we do not want Africa to appear larger, neither do we want it to appear smaller. We want Africa to be seen exactly the way it is.
Absolutely. Now, so if a Ministry of Education should ask you for a step-by-step plan, what does that roadmap look like? For example, which school years change first? Who pays for textbook and teacher retraining, not even training, retraining, and over what time scale?
Well, those are left for the policymakers to kind of flesh out. But one thing that's very important is there's got to be awareness about this. And one of the things that we have carved out as a cardinal objective now is to ensure that there is enough awareness and persuasion, incontrovertible evidence that we are on the right path, and we all need to adopt the use of the Mercator, the use of the Equal Earth projection over the current use of the Mercator projection. It speaks to the rationale for questioning falsehood. I mean, younger generations of Africans should not perceive, should not encounter, should not understand their continent or region on a false premise. Nobody should. And this is not justifiable about Africa, and it should not be justifiable about any other part of the world. The Correct the Map campaign is one that challenges more than a cartographic error. It questions the inherited narratives that shape how Africa is seen, how Africa is measured, how Africa is valued globally. So I think it's very important for, like you mentioned, the Ministry of Education, but beyond them, several other academic institutions, tech institutions, organizations that work with the map. We use Google Maps every day to navigate, our movement, right? And all of these organizations, whether it's Google, whether it's Apple, whether it's the educational institutions, we've got to get to a point of awareness for them where it becomes very important to make significant changes to the way that they currently project Africa on the map. And that's why we're doing what we're doing with this campaign.
All right, Dr. Onyegbu. Now, what about your campaign asking big institutions like the UN, World Bank, major tech platforms to switch maps? Have any of these bodies, been formally approached? Have there been any response so far if they have been approached?
Well, I think it's still early days. It will be difficult to comment on the appetite or the reluctance, of these institutions at this point. And like I said, we are driving this conversation to a point where these institutions you mentioned will be persuaded to make a change and adopt the Equal Earth projection. That's the goal of our campaign. And right now, we have seen very positive signals, especially with the media pickup of this conversation. It's shaping global conversations. Global media giants and global media platforms have picked up these conversations. We have literally gone viral with this campaign, and I think that's really the first step to achieving adoption. It's become a conversation that people are resonating with. And, a lot of times people have asked us, how come nobody has thought about this? How come nobody has done anything about this? It's been a long-standing falsehood. And a lot of people expect that by now, there should have been some challenges, there should have been some questions asked. So, right, we will believe that we're doing the right thing, we're on the right course, we're on the right path. And we believe that as time goes on, as we continue to deepen this conversation with the media, with other advocacy institutions, we will get to a point where the World Bank, the Googles, and all those that design the facilities that make our day-to-day lives easier, that are based on the maps and based on these projections, we'll begin to see the reason to adopt our message.
Okay. Now, Doctor, you did say that, the map shapes how people think. Would love for you to, explain or expatiate that for us, because we know that Africa covers about 30.3 million square kilometers. So help us point to any evidence that the Mercator projection measurably changes policy or public perception about Africa, or rather, can you explain why the Mercator makes, for example, Greenland look almost as large as Africa when we know that Africa is roughly 14 times bigger?
Yes, Africa is 14 to 15 times bigger. Africa is over 30 million square kilometers. Greenland is roughly over 2 million square kilometers. And so it's about 14 to 15 times bigger than Greenland. And to your question, there's abundant evidence that Africa has received the shorter end of the stick due to false narratives. Africa's misrepresentation on the maps is not a technical one. I think I need to mention that. It's not technical, it's narrative. Shrinking Africa shrinks the importance of the continent. The subconscious message is that the continent is peripheral, it's not central. By reducing the size of Africa, we are subconsciously downplaying its importance. False references have real consequences. Decisions about Africa, whether they are economic decisions, whether they are political or developmental, they are being made using false reference points. We must understand that visual narratives are never neutral. They're never neutral. Visual narratives reinforce or disrupt global hierarchies. And so they are instruments of power that shape how the world is seen, how the world is understood, and how the world is valued. The Correct the Map campaign, which we've embarked on, really demonstrates this by exposing how a single image, which is the Mercator projection, has reinforced global hierarchies for centuries. And originally, this projection was developed for sailors and navigation, and it has now become much more than just a tool used by sailors and navigation. But we have seen a lot of political, economic decisions that have been premised on the insinuations that are derived from how Africa is projected on the map. So it systematically distorts the scale in a way that favors the global north, right? Inflating Europe and North America while shrinking Africa and other equatorial regions. And this, it looks like a technical error on the surface of it, but it's a narrative one. And it's one that has naturalized colonial worldviews. It's one that has justified colonialism. It's one that has justified, the partitioning of Africa. It's one that has justified the reductionist narratives with which Africa is casted. So it's a very important thing to get this right. Let's get the fact that it has gone beyond just a technical error to a narrative, an intentional narrative projection. And that's why we are very emphatic in saying that there's got to be a change, because we've seen very clear evidences where decisions that have economic importance, political significance, have been based on the understandings of Africa as a reduced entity.
Okay. Now, Doctor, earlier you mentioned Google, right? And many online mapping tools we know use Mercator-style views because, they're convenient for navigation. So have you been in talks with any of those, or do you plan on having talks with some of the digital map providers like Google or Apple about offering Equal Earth as a default or optional view?
Yeah, definitely. That could be a very natural next step. But primarily, we have used our voices and those of our partners to amplify the subject, first of all. The goal is to create, like I said, enough awareness about this issue, provide incontrovertible rationale and justification for a change of direction by users. We want these institutions to come to a point of awareness and intelligence that compels them to take action both organically and proactively. And so at the moment, we have not had formal engagements with institutions that produce the tools that are based on the maps and the projections. But it's a natural next step after we have embedded this conversation in the public space. We have had adoption of this concept. There's got to be an agreement, a consensus built, first of all, around the fact that Africa has held the shorter end of the stick with the Mercator projection. There's got to be a consensus around the impact this has had, the consequences it has had on the continent. And once that consensus is widespread, once that consensus is built, it allows for other conversations. It opens the doors for other conversations, in a proactive manner with these institutions, whether they are tech institutions or they are political institutions or multilateral bodies. It then opens the doors for those types of conversations to happen. So we are still in the very first stage. Like I said, it's early days, and we are happy with the fact that this has become mainstream conversation right now. We're happy about that, and we're looking forward to the next steps.
All right, so let's talk about, foreseen challenges, because some have said that swapping projections will confuse students in school, especially those who learn coordinates, distance and navigation with the Mercator-based resources. So how do you respond to that practical concern?
Yeah, thanks, Dashin. With every change, right, there's usually reluctance and resistance until it becomes inevitable or abundantly clear. And I think that's really what we're trying to establish. We're trying to establish the case right now. Reasons were provided to justify the use of Mercator projection. Before the 16th century, there used to be navigation by sailors, right? And all of the things that have been advanced as the reasons to use Mercator projection, they were still being done in one form or the other until the use of the development of the Mercator map that then provided reasons for sailors to begin to use it and so on. And I feel like I may not have the technical expertise to question the use of the Mercator projection, but I'm also curious as to why the global south seemed to be holding the shorter end of the stick in that argument, just as it does with so many other arguments, including those that justify the partitioning of Africa at the Berlin Conference in 1885, and also justify the colonization of African countries. I mean, we can always find reasons to also justify the use of the Equal Earth projection and make the necessary kind of narrative adjustments in schools and for sailors. So I do not believe one bit that it's going to create confusion. I think it's part of the reluctance that happens when change is about to occur. And we can always make reasons for adoption of new practices. We can make reasons for adoption of new methods. And that's just how evolution happens. So I believe very strongly that the reasons that people or critics might have advanced, are very, very tiny compared to the benefits that we seem to, be advancing with the use of an Equal Earth projection.
All right. Now, do you have any donor partners lined up? Because we know that it's projected to cost a lot, especially when it comes to updating curricula, maps in public buildings, and also national statistics portals across several African countries or even the whole world. So do you have any donor partners lined up? And also, is there a policy that you hope will change because of a different map?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of things that could likely change, and I'll go to your earlier question about the
Donors.
cost of
Yeah.
implementing this and donors. Africa Union is meeting sometime in February next year, and one of the core issues on the table is to advance, reasons why there should be adoption of the equal earth projection. And so it starts with the advocacy. And I believe that when it comes down to implementation, when it comes down to institutions actually taking steps to adopt this, it will be down to the institutions themselves. And it wouldn't be like a centralized execution of a project, right? And so we're not looking at the cost as being prohibitive. We think that it's down to changing approaches and down to persuasions of institutions and convictions of institutions. And we believe that if we're able to achieve that level of awareness and consciousness, then institutions can make the necessary steps, even if it involves having to dedicate funding, towards implementation. Of course, it's going to cost a lot in terms of changing existing systems that have been built upon the previous projection, which is the Mercator projection. There would be changes, there would be financial implications to that. But if the institutions have a very good reasons for adopting this new practice, then they would have good reasons to budget funding to execute, right? And so that's how we are approaching it. We are approaching it from a perspective of let's get the rationale right, let's get the concept adopted, let's get the understanding, let's establish a baseline understanding, and let's all have a consensus that this is important. For a long time, we've consumed falsehood. Then when the implementation, we get to the point of implementation, institutions will make the necessary adjustment they need to make. In terms of donor partners, African No Filter is a donor collaborative. We receive funding from brilliant donors, and our partner, Speak Up Africa, has also been very instrumental in driving this campaign up until this point, designing the campaign, and everything we've done so far has been with the instrumentality of donor funding. We do not have donors lined up for the execution of this because we're kind of approaching it from a perspective of advocacy. And then after advocacy and we establish the understanding and the agreement and the need for this to happen, execution will be down to the institutions that make use of these projections, whether it's educational institutions or tech companies that are developing tools on the back of this, right? And so we have a lot of organizations that have in principle accepted that this is the right thing to do. So they have accepted this in principle, and I believe that the execution will be, will follow suit right after that acceptance and consensus building.
All right. Now, you've also linked, this to countering colonial narratives. How do you make sure that the campaign doesn't become politicized by governments that might use it to distract, from contemporary governance problems? I mean, we're in Africa, and we know how it works.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the issues and the challenges and opportunities on the continent are mutually exclusive. We do not think that any government should see any reason to focus on a conversation like this to the detriment of other conversations and other pressing issues on the continent. I think it would just be the height of irresponsibility for any government to do that. As much as we want this to be a topical issue, as much as the African Union is pushing this, as much as the media is talking about this, we think that it's an important thing to focus on, but it's not the only thing to focus on. And so we want to believe that government will be responsible enough to know, how to juggle all these balls at the same time. There are developmental issues and challenges around, and those issues and challenges can also be solved whilst we are also focusing on fixing this narrative problem about the size of Africa.
All right. Now, your organization, has a petition and also public outreach materials, right? How many commitments or signatures, institutional commitments do you need before, you call the campaign a clear success? And are there like interim milestones that the public should watch out for?
Yeah, absolutely. We're still calling on people to sign the petition because that's also very important in its own way. And the conversations around signing of the petitions is probably what has kind of created the momentum that this conversation in the media is riding on at the moment. And so we have thousands of signatures already. A lot of people have jumped on it, and the numbers have also increased right after the conversations began to pop up across media platforms globally. So we are very happy with what we've seen there. In terms of milestones, I think we're happy with what we have seen so far. It's been very positive. The conversation is one that has received, a lot of embrace. It's been appealing to a lot of the sentiments around colonialism, right? And the sentiments about misrepresentation of Africa is one that resonates very strongly, because there's this heightened awareness on the continent that we've got to question a lot of things. We were socialized in an environment that compelled us to accept many of these falsehoods. And I think it's becoming clearer that there's a lot that we have imbibed, a lot that we have consumed about ourselves that are false. And we've just got to begin to question all of these falsehoods. And so we're happy with what has happened so far, both on the side of signing of the petitions. It's still ongoing. We're still encouraging people to sign the petition. But as much as that is happening, we're also deepening the conversations in the media space to ensure that we are able to hit people on all fronts, whether it's on the petition side or on the side of, keying and plugging into conversations in the media space.
All right, so now let's have your final thoughts, especially from a technical standpoint. If organizations like yours have a way to guide or give some of these cartographers and publishers, labels, scale bars, or even classroom exercises, so that the new maps do not replace the other one with another confusion.
Oh, okay, yeah. We're developing tools that aid in advocating and aid in communicating around this subject. And we believe that the very next step, or the natural next step, should be, adoption of these by institutions and developing the resources that allows us to teach, on the back of this. And like I said, the campaign has only just started. It's quite early days. There are a number of steps that we intend to take that can ensure that, first, we develop instructional materials around this. The educational institutions, academic institutions, research institutions develop instructional materials around this and begin to use it going forward in their teaching processes. The tech institutions that develop, the tools and the facilities that we use for navigation, the sailors and the marine industry, begin to adopt these things and then translate it. And so the very next step is to domesticate, right? Whether you're domesticating in the academic space or in other verticals, the next step is to domesticate. And we're having conversations. We've received lots of interest around developing materials and developing other resources that can then help in the domestication process. That is ongoing at the moment. And we believe that there will be no confusion whatsoever. The Mercator projection replaced something that was in existence before. And it came in, and there was widespread consensus amongst those that drove, the conversations about the use of Mercator. And right now, we have come up with the Equal Earth projection. We're going to do exactly what we did with Mercator, right, or what they did with Mercator. And I believe that we can find a very seamless way of replacing this knowledge without creating confusions whatsoever. But it's got to be replaced, and we've all got to agree first and foremost that there's a need to replace this. Once that agreement is clear and solidified, the very next steps would be how institutions domesticate these to their private uses and to their public uses, and which is the very next step that we're going to get into.
All right. Well, thank you so much for explaining that to us, and I will definitely hope to have you back on the show for more updates on this. Thank you so much, Dr. Victor Mark-Onyegbu, Head of Grants and Community Building, Africa No Filter in Abuja, Nigeria.